Hi, I'm Alice, reporting for World Right, and we're here today in Epping to find out whether people think that making a film on the history of freedom is a good idea.
It's a brilliant idea because there's so many different trends. In Epping at the moment, it's not the same anymore. Everything's different. Everything's like, I've got two jobs and I can't just work with one job because I wouldn't be able to pay everything. So I feel like that's my freedom's gone a bit.
I think it's a very good idea because at this particular moment in time it's a particularly topical debate with everything that's going on in the country and the way that people are saying that the government is reacting to what's going on. So I think it's an excellent idea. It's something that needs to be addressed without fear or favour.
I just think it's huge at the moment, and when you've got children it's even a bigger deal. We want to be able to talk freely, and it needs to thread through everything that we do.
Is there anything in history on the subject of freedom that you would like to be covered in a film?
The Magna Carta, I mean, that is the basis of the freedoms that we've enjoyed for so long within our government, within our monarchy, within citizenship, within our electoral system, and the fact that being the basis of who we are as a country, I think is very important, and the extent to which those freedoms, ancient freedoms, are being rolled back right now.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea. I really do. I think that we forget how privileged we are to have freedom and what freedom means. And I think if you've experienced other places where people don't have freedom as a natural right, I think, you should appreciate it, and a film would help more people understand the benefits of what they have.
What aspects of freedom are important to you?
Me myself, I like the wilds. I like to be left alone and do what I want to do when I want to do it, rather than dictated to by the government.
Why do you think a film on the history of freedom in the UK is worth making?
I think it's worth making because I think we have a long history of great progress, tolerance, and I think we've lost sight of that a bit.
Are there any freedoms that are especially important to you today?
Obviously female issues and the lack of oppression in that way. But also too, I do think about, the plight of refugees and asylum seekers, because I don't think anyone leaves their home unless they really have to. I wouldn't.
Do you think a film on the history of freedom is worth making?
Absolutely, especially in the current climate where, some people aren't sure what freedom means. I think it's particularly pertinent. I think it'd be great to learn a little bit more about where freedoms come from. Do freedoms come from change from the top? Do they come from change of governance, or do they come more from struggle and from people fighting from the bottom, grassroots movements, Where do our current freedoms actually come from? I think that would be very interesting to know.
Oh, I think some people are more free than others, and I think definitely the more money you have, the more freedoms you have. Basically, money buys you freedom. And so if you're at the bottom of the pile, you really have not got as many freedoms at all. Your choices are shrunk, and so you'll end up, with very little freedoms at all. You'll be given something and say, be thankful you've got that, because it's worse still where there's none, that kind of thing.
I think people need to know about the struggles that everyone's had, and it's really important to know how we got there step by step.
Well, I'm interested in anything to do with English history, so.
I think it's very good for people to understand freedom and understand that what we have in this country as well is different to what people consider freedom in other countries, so I think it can help educate them as well.
You should be free to make whatever you want to make. Do it.
I think we're going through a bit of a difficult period at the moment, so it's as well to remind people about how we got our freedom.
Freedom is an enormous topic. It goes way beyond my time. But the little I know, if we are aware of the history, especially coming here, the history of the United Kingdom, the battles they fought, the wars they conquered, and how they get to where they are, and the freedoms people laid their lives for. So it is important that that history is replicated and is not allowed to be lost in the stream of society.
Yeah, I think it could be very educational for a lot of people today. Absolutely.
Okay. Is there any aspect of freedom that you'd like to see included in that documentary?
Well, I think obviously with the current climate and everything that's going on, I think freedom of speech is something that a lot of people are focused on at the minute, especially with all of the the riots that have gone on recently and people that are being arrested for Facebook posts and stuff. So I feel like a lot of people feel that's being impinged upon at the moment. So perhaps that would be a good subject to tackle. If we're heading down the route of arresting people for Facebook posts, we're going in a very dangerous direction. There reaches a point where we become totalitarian.
I think people need to realise what they'd be losing should they lose it. I'm not really quite sure even if I should be saying certain things,
I think because nowadays people may not be aware of history. I think with social media, everybody is on real time, like now time. And I do think that going back in the past is always having the history for everybody to be aware of what's happened, and also to understand individuals' feelings as to why there are still ongoing issues in the UK today.
I think it is a good idea, yeah.
And why do you think that?
Because it's a very big subject. We can go in either direction. Freedom to what? Freedom from what? And so lots of debate to be had. Yeah, good.
Yeah, we've seen so many of our freedoms cancelled and eroded because of the way this government and previous governments have been. It's no longer can say anything unless you're in line with their narrative. Their way of thinking is you can say what you like as long as you agree with us, and anything that the powers that be starts with government and then filters down throughout society, through police, through the judiciary, through media, everywhere. It's those freedoms are being removed, and if we don't stand up, all the things that our forefathers fought for are going to be lost. And it all starts with free speech.
I think the irony is that in the UK we got rid of the blasphemy laws, I believe it's in 2008, and now they're intending to bring them back. To me, I do not understand why. I believe I know why.
We're supposed to be a secular society.
Yeah, we are. I thought we were
supposed to be
basically a Christian society, but in these days we are secular, and I believe it's coming to silence us. It's just to silence us. I mean, we are both pensioners now, so we've been brought up at a time where we have been able to say what we want, and we are regressing.
And all those people out there, I say this, that are in favour of what the government are doing, sit and think and listen. For all those people that they're using those laws against, that you hate so much, be careful, because one day those laws could be and would be turned on you.
Well, obviously, the history of freedom is very important for everybody, so for all races, religions, things like that. And I think in this country, obviously, the history of freedom, or the history in general for different people, is not explored enough. And I would like to see maybe more interest in freedom for everybody, not just necessarily the people that have always been here.
We filmed in Epping, and now we're in Dalston to ask the same question.
A film would inform people on, people died for our freedoms today, and it would just help people appreciate and remember the people who died in World War One, World War Two. I mean, they sacrificed their lives. Where would we be today without them? So I think it's really important that we inform people.
Yeah, I think it's a lovely idea. There's so much about the history of freedom that we don't know, especially the larger public. We're never taught really about stuff like the Scottish clearances, any of the colonialism and the oppression that's happened just on this island, let alone what's happened with the British Empire and everything else overseas.
That's a really big question. Freedom is a very important value that I think should matter to everybody, and to understand the challenges and the processes and the problems that have peppered that history is important for lots of people to know.
I think it's a good idea now more than ever. Freedom is one of those things that we often don't realize how important it is and how present it must be, and it can slip away quite easily. And making a documentary gives us the opportunity to reflect, value what we have, and avoid mistakes from the past.
Freedom and democracy go hand in hand. So when you're making a program or a film about freedom, you probably are also including democracy within that, because that is the freest system that we know, and it needs protecting and it needs appreciating.
Do you worry about the erosion of free speech and freedom of press?
Yes, I do, for a number of reasons. Both the right and the left seem to sort of want to almost gag each other. I mean, you've got the sort of woke left trying to say, well, you can't say this. I mean, the cliches, oh, you can't say that anymore. You've got that sort of side, but you've also got the right who, want to say things which are perhaps inflammatory, particularly about immigrants or minorities. So you've got these two sides. In a way, it seems to me they're both trying to restrict each other's freedom of expression. And then you've got the press in the middle, or wherever they are, you've got the right-wing press, left-wing press, social media. It's a very difficult balance, because you're trying not to offend certain minorities, but at the same time you want people to be able to say what they believe, and sometimes say things that you radically disapprove of.
Do you think that making a documentary about the history of freedom is a good idea?
Yeah, I think if you get people thinking about what freedom is, that's always going to be a good thing. I think a lot of people would think that they're free in this country and say, oh, it's one of the freest countries in the world, it's the West and this, but I think that's changing, and I think people need to ask themselves what freedom is. And yeah, documentary, if it gets people thinking, I think that's good.
People say that we live in a free country. Do you think that's true?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's broadly comparatively true. I guess we've got some sort of concerning legislation introduced by previous governments about protest. There's some problems with freedom of speech with kind of the famous libel laws, and I think there's these things which I don't know a great deal about, but the slaps, the kind of ways that very wealthy people can shut down discussions about things they don't want discussed. So I'd say, relatively yes, but to the extent that I would like, no.
Yeah, I think it's especially important in the modern day, because I think that everyone's obviously kind of wrapped up within social media and things like that, and people conform to the same ideas because of that. So it creates a kind of a homogenous society. And so I think that by creating a film about freedom, I think it kind of will give exposure to new ideas and kind of give a different perspective on how people can live and enjoy the freedoms that we all have in this sort of country.